Yeah. No, all good. I do have a little introduction slide, but it's just a few key points and just showing what I, just a brief thing of my background and then what I aim to sort of get across today. Yeah. Yeah.
So you've got 2 kids. How old are they?
3.5 and 1.5.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, it's chaos.
Yes.
Yeah. So she's got her own job, her own company where she does freelance makeup and hair sort of stuff. So mostly wedding industry, but also like photo shoots and whatever, matric dances, whatever special occasion where someone needs.
There's a lot of those.
Yeah.
It's so funny. It's like not an hour. Well, you're not your era, my era. I mean, you only had your makeup done for your wedding.
Yeah.
Now, the trick dance, the year before dance, this thing, you know.
A night out on the town. Some people even just go into a fancy dress, Halloween as well. Yeah. So she travels quite a bit for that, like Midlands, North Coast, like Zululand and stuff.
And is it mostly on weekends that she's busy?
So Monday to Friday she runs the ship, and then Saturday I'm pretty much,
Mom and dad.
yeah. But luckily we've got my mom around, so she helps out quite a lot.
That helps.
Yeah. So the oldest is at daycare, and the youngest we want to keep at home till about 3. Same with Connor, our oldest. We kept him home till he was about 3, and then sent him because my mom was there. She's a ex-teacher, so she knows what she's doing with the little ones.
There's good discipline there.
Yeah. Well, as best as we can.
As much as you can.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I don't know. I think there's a huge difference when your mom is at home.
Yeah.
There is a huge difference in the child. They're more stable. They're more grounded.
Yeah.
They've got a wider perspective of life and everything.
Yeah. No, 100%.
And then the opportunity to actually grow.
Yeah.
Confidence.
Yeah. And not just sort of outsourced. Yeah.
Actually, I was telling Chrissy today, because I said to her, it's so funny, like I'm 54 now. I remember my friend when she did teaching and she did it at Edgewood College, so it was like just for primary school,
Yeah.
what I would call class 1, class 2.
Yeah.
Standard 1. And I'm thinking the same after my 2 years, so she said, just read, I don't know what's happening with it. She says, the children arrive in class 1, it's like the parents couldn't wait to get rid of it. They come with no manners. She's professed, and this is, this is like 24 years ago. So that lot have grown up and are raising children now.
So it's just snowballing.
6 months, they didn't understand that I was the adult, they were the children. When I said, please sit down and keep quiet, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Sit down and keep quiet, you don't give me cheek. And just 5 minutes or 6 months, and we have 6 months of this,
Yeah.
So I think it's much
No, my mom was class 1 and class 2. Yeah, well, exactly. Or they outsource it to TV. Yeah, outsource it to TV and laptops and iPads. And my mom said the same thing. She was class 1 and class 2 for like 35, 40 years. Same thing. She just says, these kids come in, they can't, they don't have the basics, and it's seen as the teacher's job to do it all.
That's exactly what Barbara said, and that's 30-something years
Yeah.
ago. She said, it's like they're harming them all, and they can't wait for us to raise their children. She says, the kids come in not knowing anything.
Yeah. Expecting the teacher to do all the work.
Yeah. I do not know why you're not. Is it a green background?
It's supposed to be green, yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. Oh well.
It's just you did something. But anyway, you've got a proper battery now. Just give them 5 minutes, I'm sure.
Yeah, no rush. Yeah, that's my one.
black.
Yeah.
It just shows on me now because of the blue light.
Okay.
Are you happy with it?
Yeah, then where did his clicker go? His clicker's disappeared. He had his phone here with a clicker.
Yes.
I'll check with him.
Clicker thing.
Okay.
Because if he gives it to you, the signal's too far, and then it changes the colour.
Okay.
So
Oh, that's all right.
it just goes to what do you see?
I'll just do a. Yeah, that's fine. I think it should be fine. Yeah, should be fine without it.
Everybody, good evening. Thank you very much for coming and welcome. Really appreciate you coming through to support us. I'd like to introduce you, well, okay, firstly, I'm Riva. I'm your estate manager for all my sons, and it's really, really lovely to see you all here this evening. I'm very grateful that you've come. So this is Brendan Smith. He's the environmental manager for Zimbali, and he's very kindly offered to come and talk to us about our infamous or famous monkeys, vervets. How can we live with them, and how do we live with them better? So I'm not going to spoil his show because I think he's. How long have you worked at Zimbali for?
5 years, which is about 15 years in normal people's. Yeah.
So we've been at Zimbali alone for 5 years, and obviously we're working now with him a lot because we've all discovered that we have this beautiful forest that side by side with Zimbali beautiful forest. So we've got the same pros and cons in our estate as does Zimbali have, which is quite exciting to know. And we're going to discover more about our forest, but for now we all know that there's monkeys. So without saying anything further, I'm going to hand over to Brendan. Thank you very much for coming. I do
Pleasure.
appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. Am I audible to everyone without the mic? We're all good at the back there? You can hear me well? Okay, great.
I suggest we switch off that air conditioner and open the door. Is it okay?
Fine by me? Yeah. Okay. All right, we'll get started while that's being sorted out. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a bit of a further introduction to what Riva already said. I have my honours in environmental management and 14 years experience in the environmental industry. 5 years at Zimbali Estate as the environmental manager, managing the wildlife, managing the habitats. So something just important to note, I don't have a vested interest in any particular camp because this topic seems to be very polarizing for some reason. It's a very emotional topic and people generally tend to end up in one camp or the other. So I have no vested interest in either camp. My vested interest is the management of the ecosystems that we live within. So I hope that my presentation today will be a balanced approach, a balanced presentation. We'll talk more facts and scientific data and stay away from emotions, opinions and gut feelings. So this day and age, it's probably a controversial statement, but you can have your own opinions, you can't have your own facts. So some people might disagree with that, but that's just reality. Hopefully we can dispel some myths and get some useful information that will assist you to coexist. And ultimately, we all breathe the same air. So further to what Riva said, wildlife doesn't acknowledge the boundary fence between Seaward and Zimbali Estate. So what happens here, thank you very much, what happens here at Zimbiti directly affects what happens at Zimbali and vice versa. So like I say, we all breathe the same air and it's vitally important that we have the same sort of approach to the management of the environment. Next slide, please. So the vervet monkey, it's a highly social animal. They live in groups of up to 70 individuals. Although within the urban context, we see slightly smaller troops, usually between 25 and 40, and a higher density of these smaller troops as opposed to the larger troops. They're matriarchal. So a lot of people tend to think that the guy with the blue tools is the boss and runs the show. Okay, it's not the case. As with a lot of herd or troop animals in wildlife, they're matriarchal. The females stay in those troops for their entire lives, and it's the males that come and go. So all males, once they reach sexual maturity, get kicked out of the group or the troop, and they then have to go and find a troop of their own. And this is nature's way of protecting genetics, ensuring no inbreeding. And it's a lot of people don't tend to realize that it's actually the females that run the troop. And there's complex social hierarchies within the troop. So it's usually governed by the alphas, the alpha male as well as the alpha female, and her direct descendants that are the high-ranking troops. So there's very complex social hierarchies. And when you start to mess with that, you actually really create a lot of chaos. Things like grooming are very important. So when you see animals getting groomed, those are usually the higher-ranking members of that troop. And the lower-ranking members of the troop actually fight and compete to groom those higher-ranking individuals to gain favor. They will also fight and compete to allo mother, so look, babysitting basically, of the higher-ranking females' individual babies, and that allows the higher-ranking females to actually do more foraging and get more food whilst they're being looked after. So monkeys have an extremely important role in our ecosystem of seed dispersal. Okay, so they're extremely messy eaters. Those of you that probably have avo trees probably curse them, because what the monkey does, he picks one avo, has 2 bites and drops it to the floor. Okay, why does he do that? Well, that's seed dispersal. In the natural environment with indigenous trees, that's exactly what they're doing. And if you've ever sort of been in an area where there are blue duiker and bushbuck, you'll see that they follow the monkey troops, because they constantly dropping food down and they're munching on all that food as they go. So just also a little correlation there between those species. So monkeys are extremely well adapted to urban environments, mostly due to the surplus of food that's available in urban environments, and the fact that their predators are less well adapted. So in urban environments, the predators of monkeys are not necessarily here. We're a little bit different in this ecosystem. We do have pythons that are prevalent in the area, which are one of the monkey's predators, as well as crowned eagles in the area that do predate on monkeys as well. Leopard, haven't seen one in a while, but they are also one of the bigger predators of monkeys. So they have a very diverse diet, and we'll touch on that a little bit later, but they are omnivorous. They eat seed, they eat fruit, they eat meat as well. So usually any animal that's smaller than them tends to end up as prey: amphibians, reptiles, birds' eggs, those sorts of things, birds as well. They're seasonal breeders. So a small bird, a baby bird, definitely, yeah. Not quite, no. Okay, so they are seasonal breeders. They do time their breeding so that their infants come after the first rains in spring, when there's abundant food. Everyone always gets a little bit shocked during this time, because they see this huge abundance of monkey babies everywhere, and they think, oh my gosh, the population is exploding. But generally, 1/3 of all infants don't make it to adulthood. So there is a high mortality rate with infant monkeys, and that's through various different things, from predation to vehicle mortalities, etc. One thing that's very important to note is that population growth is linked to food resources. So monkeys do self-regulate in terms of food availability, like most species do, and the more food, the more monkeys. Next slide, please. Okay, so just some population trends. They are one of the few species that are extending their range, particularly in KZN, and that's mainly due to changing land uses and afforestation. So there's a difference between reforestation and afforestation. Afforestation is the planting of trees where trees did not exist before. So a lot of people don't understand that our coastal grassland biome is extremely threatened, mostly from development, but also from the planting up of trees. So if you look at historical imagery of suburbs like Kloof in the early 1900s, you'd be hard-pressed to find a tree. If you go onto Google Earth and you look at Kloof Hillcrest area now, and you'll barely see any ground. It's just tree canopies everywhere. Plantations as well, particularly moving up into the Midlands area, that's created habitat for monkeys where habitat didn't exist. So those are those human-created habitats, and most people don't understand that these human-created habitats often have a higher food and shelter value than the natural ecosystems that were here before we intervened. And mainly, one of the biggest aspects influencing this population trend is the access to additional anthropogenic refuse or waste food. So that is our dustbins, that is access to our kitchens, and basically everything else that lies around that is food to the monkey in the urban environment. And then, as I've said already, there are fewer predators in the urban habitat, although things like vehicle mortalities, dogs, and direct persecution has in some way altered that and replaced the predators that we no longer have here. So the predator aspect is definitely less as opposed to the access to food resources in terms of how that influences population trends. So these are just general population trends. Obviously, this is very different in each environment. So I've just got two case studies, one being Zimbali Eco Estate and the other being Zimbali Estate. Two of those probably being the biggest estates and ecocentric estates in the Belita area. So Zimbali, they have been studying monkeys for a number of years. This data might be a little bit outdated. It's from about 2 or 3 years ago when they last published data. But what they found there was that their population was stable, and despite monkeys giving birth each year, the population was kept basically stable from things like vehicle mortalities as well as natural predation. So they didn't have an increase in population year on year, and it was relatively stable. Zimbali Estate, we've been monitoring monkeys for about 5 years now. Whilst we did have that originally in the first 2 to 3 years, in 1 year we had a 97% increase in monkeys on the estate, in the monkey population. Okay, and that obviously led to a massive increase in human-monkey conflict, purely just because of the higher density of monkeys. So that just shows the dynamic nature of this, where yes, we have general population trends, we have general trends, but each ecosystem is dynamic and different. So we don't have a one-size-fits-all approach. Next slide, please. So threats. There are many threats to monkeys. Whilst I've touched on the fact that they have benefited from some of the change in land use, they do also suffer from the habitat loss that we're experiencing on a mass scale. Vehicle mortalities. In Zimbali Estate, each year we lose between 30 and 40 monkeys just to roadkill. Those are the carcasses that we are able to recover and pick up. We don't know how many wander off into the bush and die a day or two later. So vehicle mortalities, like I've said, have almost replaced the lack of predators in the urban environment, and it is a major, major issue. Other hazards in the urban environment, you've got barbed wire, you've got electric fencing, you've got poisons, you've got disease, you've got all sorts of things in this urban environment that are unnatural and unknown to most monkeys that can have an impact on monkeys. Dogs, in terms of your pets, there's often conflict there and injuries sustained on both sides, from the dogs as well as the monkeys. Direct persecution, that would be people shooting them with pellet guns, with catties, with all sorts of things, trying to poison them. It leads to a lot of horrible injuries as well as maiming and often death. There's also an increased monkey conflict. Because you have a higher density of monkeys in the area, you're going to have a lot of dispersing males, you're going to have a lot of monkeys fighting between troops, and young males trying to join troops and getting into altercations. So we certainly saw that on Zimbali Estate when we had that increase in monkey population. We had a significant increase in injured monkeys from natural causes. And then poaching. So monkeys are meat, they are eaten by many people, and this picture here just shows I think it's 305 snares that have been removed from the Belita area in the last year. And monkeys are usually the first sign of snares in an area, mostly because they make a big noise when they're caught, and someone will investigate and see this monkey caught in a snare. And often they are able to bite themselves out or pull themselves out, and they come through with these snare injuries that are then evident, and then we know there's snares in the area. So if you look sort of towards the bottom there, Seaward is right there, as is Zimbali Estate. And that's basically, I think, about 60 snares that has been removed from the green belt between Ashton Sport Ground and the wastewater treatment works. So that's on our doorstep. Those are our monkey troops that are moving into that green belt and crossing the M4 that are being impacted on snares as well. And the reason why we know about those snares was we had observed a monkey with a snare injury that I knew that troop came from that side of the road, and when we investigated, that's what we found. So there are lots of threats to the monkeys in the urban environment, and it's definitely not all rosy for them. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'll just let this video play out, and then we can unpack it a little bit. So what you see is a spotted eagle owl on its nest in Zimbali Estate, and a band of monkeys raiding it. They try their best bravely to fight them off, but they're obviously no match for these monkeys that outnumber them as well as outsmart them. So ultimately what happened is they got chased off. The monkeys took 3 or 4 bites from the egg and dropped it on the floor and moved off. And this was a failed breeding year for those 2 spotted eagle owls, unfortunately. Okay, so like I said, monkeys, they eat not just seeds and fruits. So they do have a biodiversity impact, okay? Nature is such an intricate web, and when we pull at one side, we always have these unknown consequences down the line. So yes, monkeys have their role to play in seed dispersal and regulating populations of certain species, but if you have an overpopulation of monkeys, you are going to have additional impacts on anything that's below them in the food chain. So birds suffer particularly as bird nests get raided. We have hundreds of records in Zimbali Estate of residents who have multiple bird species attempting to breed in their properties and observing the monkeys raiding the nests and those birds breeding attempts failing. So there is a very real impact in terms of biodiversity and the general ecosystem as a whole. In terms of the monkeys and if there is an overpopulation of them. It's a big if. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the human perceptions. We've spoken about the monkeys. Let's shift across to us now. Let's talk a little bit about us. As I said earlier, it's a highly emotive topic, and there's generally 2 camps. It's the shame camp, leave our monkeys alone, and it's the exterminate them camp. And there's very, very little middle ground. There's no balanced approaches or opinions. It's either for or against, and you can't be in the middle. So that's generally how I see it and how I have experienced it. And there's various sort of, themes that we often see. If you go on social media, you see posts like monkeys going crazy, and it's generally the same comments. They were here first. We've invaded their space. They don't have enough food. We need to feed them. Well, I was here, I've bought my home and now I'm a prisoner in my own home. They need to go. The populations are exploding. Or other people saying, well, no, the monkeys are disappearing, So there's so many different perceptions. There's a perception of an increased habituation as well and increased aggressiveness. And again, there's certain case studies. For example, at the school just down the road here, there's been at least 5 children bitten in the last few months. So yes, in some instances, no in other instances. So we can't make these blanket statements, and that's why we need to rely on science and good conservation practice, and we need to stay away from emotional decision making. Anything in conservation, you need to stay away from emotions. Next slide, please. So when it comes to management actions, like I said, you need to focus on best practice conservation and environmental management. You need to be reliant on scientific data and research. So you can't just say, well, I think this or I think that. Well, my opinion is this, my opinion is that. Well, what are you basing that on? It's just your opinion. So you need to do research. You need to base any decisions on scientific data. Okay? You need to be consistent and formalized. So we have a monkey management plan in Zimbali Estate. It's formalized because if I get knocked by a bus tomorrow, I don't want someone else coming in and saying, well, I don't like monkeys. Let's do it like this. Or I think X or I think Y. So it needs to be consistent, because remember, things take time with nature. You can't have overnight success with nature. Anything takes years. So if you're not consistent and you haven't got something formalized, nothing's going to change. Okay. You need to take the entire ecosystem into account, which means we have to treat all biodiversity as equal, and we can't favor certain species. So again, like I said, we have to take emotion out of it. You might love monkeys, you might hate monkeys. That shouldn't influence your management actions in terms of how you manage any population of animals. So in conservation, it's all about taking the emotion out of the decision making. So we don't do knee-jerk reactions and we don't do emotional decision making. And ultimately, you need to be dynamic. Okay, things change. Like I've given the Zimbali Estate example. If we weren't continuously monitoring on a year-by-year basis, we wouldn't have been able to adapt our management plans accordingly. And like I've said, each ecosystem is different. It doesn't mean there's a one-size-fits-all approach. It doesn't mean what's happening here must happen there. Okay, nature is extremely dynamic. It changes weekly, and you have to be dynamic as well. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. All right, if you take anything from me tonight, if you've slept through this entire presentation thus far, just focus on this slide for the next 5 minutes, please. Feeding is one of the biggest impacts on monkeys and interaction and human-monkey conflict along KZN's coast. So there's two types of feeding. You've got active feeding, which is your direct feeding of monkeys from the hand or dropping food on the floor for them to eat. And your passive feeding is when you get robbed, when the monkeys get access to your bins, your kitchen, your dining room table, your cupboard, and they steal food. So active feeding is the sort of voluntary feeding of monkeys, whereas passive feeding is basically involuntary, and we all know how frustrating that can be. Bird feeders are monkey feeders. They're also rat feeders because rats love the seeds as well. So I won't go down into a tangent of why bird feeders are so bad for the environment as a whole, but with specific relation to monkeys, they do attract monkeys and they do provide an additional food resource for monkeys. If you want to feed birds, if you want to feed bushbuck, if you want to feed monkeys, plant indigenous plants. Okay? These are natural wild animals. They existed here long before we were here, and they survived perfectly fine on the natural indigenous vegetation. If you want wildlife in your garden, plant indigenous. Another very controversial topic is feeding stations. Okay? We do not advocate for feeding stations unless it's a very controlled exercise. So in Zimbali Estate, we have 456 hectares. How big is Seaward? To put you on the spot? It's probably about half that. Okay, and we've got 100 hectares dedicated to conservation. So we've got 100 hectares of conservation space where there's no people. Okay, and what we did is we did a very temporary and very controlled feeding station within these conservation belts, far from people. And the objective of that was to rewild these monkeys. Rewild meaning they find a food source in the forest, which encourages them to return, which then encourages them to spend more time in the forest. The more time they spend in the forest, the less time they spend in people's homes or at our restaurants, the less opportunity for human-monkey conflict. Okay, but feeding stations do not work in normal suburbia, okay? Whilst you might have a big garden and you feed them in the bottom of your garden in the corner, it's not a problem for you, it's causing chaos for your neighbor, okay? And it should not be a continuous supply of food because you're then altering, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but you're altering the natural ecosystem, all right? So it has to be very controlled and it has to be done properly. So generally, feeding stations are a big no-no unless it's very, very well controlled and managed. So what are the impacts of feeding? So it's an increased habituation and level of aggression because monkeys have now lost their fear of humans. Okay, we can equate it to baboons, very similar species, very similar traits. We can be grateful we don't have baboons in this area. I'm sure everyone's familiar with the struggles that people in the Cape are having with this habituation and aggression issue. So I do a lot of hiking in the Drakensberg. I'll go out for 3 or 4 days, 50 kilometers out from the nearest camp, and I promise you now, I cannot get within 800 meters of a wild baboon. They see me from the other side of the valley, they bark, and they run, okay? What happens when I get back to camp? I can literally walk up to one and pat him on the head, okay? And that just shows you the difference between wild animals that associate humans with danger and animals that have been fed and habituated and had close encounters that then learn people doesn't equal bad, people equals food. And it's that simple. You're creating a dependency by feeding, okay? So you will have monkeys continually coming around and return visits to your property and becoming dependent on that food source that you are supplying. And I've seen it. I know exactly who feeds monkeys in Zimbali Estate, because the monkeys are not naturally foraging and they're not naturally moving through the area. They're sitting, waiting on the lawn for their food supply to come through. So you're creating a dependency and you're changing that natural behavior and you're encouraging them to return to these urban environments as opposed to staying in the natural areas. You're creating assertive behavior towards humans, where monkeys then start to expect food from humans. So monkeys can't determine who's friend and who's foe. Riva might like to feed them, but you might not like to at all. They can't tell which is the difference. Remember, they associate food with people now. Not food with Riva, food with people. So they might walk up to Riva, and sorry, I'm picking on you, I'm sure this is not what you do, and she hands them a pawpaw and everything's fine and happy, and the monkeys eat it and move off. They then move on to you expecting the same treatment, and when they don't get it, they get a little bit aggressive, you get a shock, and we have conflict. Okay, so the young also don't learn to forage. Just remember now, this is all learned behavior. So if you're continually feeding them, you're creating this dependency, and now all of a sudden the young learn, well, no, I don't need to go and forage in that milkweed tree for 15 minutes to get 20 calories of food. I can sit here for 30 minutes, wait for my food, it'll get dumped here, and I can get 500 calories in a minute. So why should I go and forage for all that time and all that effort with these tiny little fruits when I could just sit here and wait? You're causing an unnatural population increase. As I've said before, population number directly related to food availability. By supplying food, you are unnaturally enriching that population, enriching that carrying capacity, and inflating the population number. And then you've got to ask, well, what's going to happen when the taps turn off? What happens when that human feeder leaves? So Riva's been putting out 10 kgs of food every week for the monkeys. All of a sudden, she moves to another estate, and that food source is gone, completely gone. What's going to happen? Well, now you've got an inflated population that can't be supported by the natural food supply. The weaker animals will die a slow, agonizing death because they cannot compete with the stronger animals for now what we have a limited availability of food. So it really is cruel, and the same goes for birds. So Burman Bush, those that might not be familiar, it's a nature reserve in Durban, just off from Gainey Road. There the population of monkeys quadrupled in 20 years. And 100% understand that people do it out of the goodness of their hearts, and there's no judgment. But what was happening at Burman Bush was that someone was coming through every day with the excess of fruit that he didn't sell at his fruit and veg market, and he'd dump out a crate of food every afternoon for the monkeys. And over a period of time, they noticed a quadrupling of that population, purely based on that availability of food. And I'm talking back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, so a bit before my time. But back then as well, monkeys were seen as a tourist attraction. So this practice was almost encouraged because all of a sudden the monkeys were there. Everyone went through on a Sunday afternoon because they knew that's when that food was going to get dropped, and they'd all see the monkeys, get a picture, try and feed the monkey by their hand, and that's a great photo to take back to Joburg when they go back home where they don't have monkeys. And it became a bit of a tourist attraction, but that has real consequences on the environment. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the human and monkey conflict issue. There's a long and documented history of it on the KZN coastal region, primarily due to a few reasons. So we are developing within existing vervet monkey habitat, which is coastal forest. Okay, there's a crossover of diet. So we both like fruit and vegetables. We both like bread, and monkeys are extremely opportunistic. They're incredibly clever, and that's why they've been able to adapt to the urban environment like most other animals haven't. Okay. You don't see, particularly outside of these sort of protected estates, obviously you've got bushbuck and duiker and mongoose and other things here, but you don't see that in other urban areas along the KZN coastline. You will see monkeys. Why? Because they're clever, they're opportunistic, and they can adapt very well. Okay? It's not an isolated issue. It doesn't only affect Ballito, it affects the entire KZN coastline. And it's not a new problem, and it's not something that's going to be going away anytime soon. So I think that's something we all need to accept. You can trap, poison, shoot, relocate every single monkey in Seaward Estate. I'd give it 1 month, 2 months, and a new troop will be in. Okay? Apart from that being unethical and illegal, it's not sustainable and it's not feasible and it's not a solution. So they're not going anywhere. We need to learn to adapt as well. Okay? As I've said, feeding has altered their natural behavior. It's created conflict. It's created a loss of fear and habituation. And that's what's causing this human-monkey conflict. As I've already mentioned, there's the availability of food equals an increase in population number. And obviously, the more monkeys and the more humans, the more conflict that's going to happen. And something we need to remember, monkeys are wild animals. And I think that's a little bit lost on everyone because we see them all the time. We kind of take them for granted, and I think it's a privilege to have wildlife in your gardens. I know a lot of my friends have immigrated to England and they miss the monkeys, they miss the birds, they miss the noises, the crickets, the insects. So we're incredibly blessed to have all this biodiversity in our backyard. But that comes with a bit of a responsibility to treat those monkeys as wild animals, to respect them as wild animals and enjoy them as wild animals. Let's not habituate them, let's not tame them. We all have our own pets. Let's not make monkeys a pet. Next one, please. Okay, so coexisting. How are we going to coexist? So that picture shows how we're not coexisting, and that's pretty much a regular occurrence. That monkey was picked up on Zimbali Estate with shotgun pellets in him. Obviously, he wasn't shot on Zimbali Estate because anyone discharging a shotgun, well, they would be caught very quickly because of the noise impact. But often we have monkeys that come from the sugarcane areas, they disperse from farming areas, they disperse from areas with urban settlements, townships, etc., that are highly persecuted, and we pick up these sorts of injuries. This is a very common occurrence, unfortunately. So largely there is not much coexistence, but there is a way to coexist. So firstly, secure your bins. Okay, so at Zimbali Estate, bin day used to be buffet day. And what we did as a homeowners association is we bought a monkey-proof bin clip for every single bin. We installed it on every single resident's bin, and we made it compulsory that you use that bin with that monkey-proof bin clip. And if you don't, you get a fine. And I cannot tell you what a difference that has made. It has cut off that food supply, and it has made a significant impact on the management of monkeys. So whilst we had the funds to do that, obviously not every homeowners association can afford to do that. A monkey-proof bin clip is about $80 or $100 installed onto your bin. It's really that simple. Okay. Secure your homes. Sorry? $9.25. Oh, 25. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, cheapers, even cheaper. Okay, fantastic. Extremely affordable. And, you know, you think, as with the garbage, you wheel it out, not your problem anymore. So you don't care if the monkeys get into it because the garbage man is going to clean it all up and put it away. It is your problem because you're giving access to that food resource and you're compounding the issues, and that's why your home's getting broken into by monkeys. So secure your homes, all right? Let's be clever about it. Let's ensure that there's not food lying around or easy access for monkeys. Let's be alert to when they're coming around. Okay, do not feed vervets. I think we've touched on that enough. The impact is clear. Remove attractants from your home, all right? If you have a nice big glass window, don't go and put fruit there. It's attracting the monkeys there. And they're going to find a way in sooner or later. They will sit and they'll wait. You won't see them. They'll be in the bush. They'll sit and wait for 45 minutes for that one opportunity that you've turned your back and left the door just slightly ajar, and they will be in there. Okay, so just remove attractants. It's really that simple. Okay, maintain our natural corridors. We can't cut down every tree, concrete everything, and then complain that the monkeys are jumping on our homes and raiding our kitchens. Okay, maintain the natural corridors, maintain the natural food resources, and that will help mitigate the issue. Just remember, there's no silver bullet solution here. Not one thing is going to assist this. It's a whole bunch of different little things that you need to all implement. Okay, don't leave pet food outside. Don't have bird feeders. There then there's also a bit of responsibility for us to adapt. Okay? Monkeys are usually creatures of routine that can fluctuate seasonally, but generally they have the same routine, and they'll generally be moving through your property around the same time of the day. Just note it. Spend a week noting what time they come through, identify the patterns, or if you're not at home, inform your domestic, and just know, okay, it's 11:30, the monkeys usually come around this time. Let me just go close that back door. Let me just make sure that my house is secure. Simple, okay? Don't eat in front of monkeys, all right? If there's a troop of monkeys playing in your garden, don't tempt fate. Don't go walk out there with some food and sit and eat it. You're going to cause a conflict situation, and particularly with children. You have to be very, very careful with children. Monkeys do not fear children, and there will be issues. You can make them feel unwelcome. So draw your boundary, set your boundaries, and implement non-lethal or non-harmful ways of keeping them at bay. A hose pipe, a water gun, a pipe with some holes in it that you swing around. Okay, we've implemented monkey monitors at all of our Zimbali facilities, and it has improved drastically. Just one person walking around, shaking a bit of a stick, making a bit of a noise, and all of a sudden they realize, this is not so easy. Let me maybe move off. Okay, and then teach people. Again, it's our responsibility to educate and inform. We obviously get friends and family that come over, maybe from up country that don't have monkeys, and they think, oh, so cute, let me try and feed them. And everyone has a laugh and whatever, but end of the day, they're creating a problem that you're going to have to deal with. We have it as quite a big problem in Zimbali Estate. Obviously, we have a lodge and a hotel, so we have this large influx of visitors on an ongoing basis. So it's very important for me to get the word out there, to educate people, tell them not to feed monkeys. And we impose a very strict 10,000 Rand fine on anyone caught feeding monkeys because of the issue that it creates. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so further to coexisting, how do you interact with a monkey? Okay, so you come face to face with them. There's certain things that you can do that will mitigate the situation. There's certain things you can do that's going to escalate the situation. It's very much like having a toddler. There's certain behaviors that trigger them, and there's certain behaviors that can avoid the issues. So monkeys are protective. Obviously, they're a troop animal. They're very protective over their troop, and particularly their babies. So if you're walking down the road and you see a troop of monkeys on the left-hand side of the road, and you can just cross to the right and pass them that way, just do that, particularly if there's babies. Any sort of close interaction, it's going to cause conflict. So avoid close contact where you can, okay? Be proactive. Unfortunately, a lot of people walk with their heads down on their phone these days, and then basically by the time they look up, the monkey's at their feet, okay? But just try and be more observant in your daily movements, to be proactive in avoiding any sort of conflict situation that you might bump into. If there's a monkey in your house, all right, remain calm and quiet. So what often happens is there's a monkey in the house, you start running after them and screaming and shouting, okay? A monkey or any wild animal is always risk averse, okay? Wild animals do not have vets or doctors that are going to treat them in the wild, okay? They get a small cut that could become infected, and they can have a very slow, agonizing death. So flight or fight, the monkey will always choose flight if given that option. If you corner it and it doesn't have an option, it's going to choose fight, and that's when it gets ugly. So a monkey is hard to corner, but at the end of the day, there's various options that you have inside your house to avoid that situation. So if you walk in, there happens to be a monkey, stay calm, stay quiet, open the nearest window, give them space, use a towel to shepherd them out, but avoid shouting, avoid screaming, avoid trying to corner it, avoid trying to catch it. That's when you're going to have an issue. That's when you're going to have conflict situations. Remain calm, remain quiet, give them an exit. And I promise you they'll take that exit as quick as they can. They sometimes need a bit of shooing, and that's why I say use a towel, because it creates a bit of a scare tactic. But at the
What do you do with a monkey that's not scared of you? I've had it often where you walk in and it's sitting on the counter eating. You go, hey, this is being crazy.
yeah.
Open the door and it looks at you and goes to the next thing. It's that where it doesn't want to leave. It's not scared of you.
Absolutely.
So you stand there, what? Just watch these for the food.
So, no, absolutely.
So you have
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a tricky thing because each situation is different. But my advice would be to call their bluff. Okay? So at Zimbali, we also have a training program where people that are too scared to walk on the estate anymore or too scared to open a window can approach us and we provide training to them. Okay? So I'll give you one example. A middle-aged woman, petrified of monkeys, stopped walking on the estate, stopped exercising because of this fear. And we took her into the training program, and one day we took her to a point of her crying at the sight of monkeys, to just teaching her how to interact with them, and I'll get further into this and we can also discuss it afterwards as well. And we got her to a point just by teaching her body language and how to act around monkeys, that at the end of the training session, which was about 2 hours, there was a troop of monkeys about 100 meters away, and we stood over here, and she walked through them without a single incident. So each situation is different, but call their bluff, because a monkey, like I said, is risk averse. He's going to push you as far as he can until that last minute when he realizes, whoa, this guy's not backing off. Okay, so it's a learned behavior that most monkeys have learned. You push them a little bit, and they back off. But I promise you, 9 times out of 10, it will not escalate into an actual attack, so long as you don't corner that monkey. Okay, so again, like I say, every situation is different, but what I would say is call their bluff, and it's something that I've dealt with as well, picking up injured monkeys. I've had monkeys on my feet, sort of, going at me to try and protect their injured monkey, and those in wildlife rescue will have the same thing. I've never once been bitten. Okay, I know there are incidents of people being bitten, but often that's because that monkey is cornered and sees no way out. So long as you give him an exit route and you shepherd him towards that exit route, he will go. So it's the same thing with women, okay? Monkeys are not scared of women, and it's a learned behavior. They've learned that a woman will drop, scream, and run, okay? Majority of them have learned that a man will not do that, okay? You always got the exception of 1 or 2 very, really brave individuals, but generally, if your wife's out there trying to shoo the monkeys away, as soon as you walk out there, they start moving. Okay, again, it's a learned behavior, and you can even dress if a woman dresses up as a man, they'll see through it, and they'll still push the. So it's a lot of learned behaviors, but they are risk averse, they are conflict averse, and they will always choose flight instead of fight. But they have learned, particularly the aggressive ones. If you stand your ground, this guy's going to back off eventually, or he's going to leave me alone. But if you push them, if you pressure them, they will move. Risky, because you never know, but always good to maybe have something of personal protection, so that if you have that sort of monkey come at you, you can maintain a distance of 1 meter. Maybe it's a stick, maybe it's a sjambok or something, not to go and try and hit them, keep it here, approach them, pressurize them, shepherd them out, but if he turns and tries to bite, then at least you can, and step back. That would be my advice, but obviously every scenario is different.
A spray bottle with water, they run.
Yeah. Yeah, generally a hose pipe, water, anything like that. But what we learned also with our monkey monitors is they had a spray bottle, and the monkey would just sit out of reach of that spray bottle and laugh at them. So they adapt and they learn. Okay, so it's the same thing with people say, "Oh, put a snake down." Okay, the snake, you put it down, and it works for a couple of days until they learn and they adapt and they realize that there's no consequence to that, and then they don't care anymore. People will say, "Oh, play the crowned eagle's call." Play it the first time, they duck and they run. Play it the second time, but the third time, they realize there's no consequence and they're fine. So unfortunately, monkeys are clever, they are opportunistic, and they do adapt very well. They're quick learners, and unfortunately, it's a learned behavior that they have become so habituated and brave. But we can get more into it as we get to the question and answer session. So, monkey communication, okay? Monkeys can't talk, so they communicate via body language, okay? Particularly facial expressions. So unfortunately, our first reaction when confronted by a monkey is to open our mouth, make a noise, bare our teeth, and raise our eyebrows, okay, which in monkey language is basically a sign of aggression. Okay, so our sort of shocked face is their sort of, you want to fight face, okay? So monkeys communicate in that way. So that's why I say you've got to try and remain calm, okay? Don't raise your eyebrows at them, don't mimic them, don't bare your teeth. Those are all signs of, well, let's fight kind of a thing, you know? So that's how monkeys communicate, and body language is very important. Confidence, not staring directly in the eyes, not mimicking, not doing any of the facial expression stuff. So what happens when threatened by a monkey? If you are feeling threatened, never turn and run, okay? Instinct is a powerful thing in most animals, and in most animals, when something turns and runs, they chase, okay? So if you're feeling threatened by a monkey, or if a monkey is feeling threatened by you, they will usually warn you, okay? They'll bark, they'll show their fangs, or show their teeth, and generally puff themselves up a little bit. That's a warning sign to say, well, this monkey is feeling threatened. Hey, back off. You know, there might be a baby somewhere. They might just be feeling unnerved by your presence. Just take it as a hint and move off, okay? If you're feeling threatened by a monkey, like I said, don't turn and run, don't shout, don't panic, okay? Face the monkey, don't look at it directly, so just look away a little bit and just slowly move back, okay? So that's what to do when approached by a monkey, and like I said, general rule, don't shout, okay? So shouting confuses a monkey, it scares a monkey, and it makes it unpredictable. So that escalates the situation, you bring in more emotion into the situation, and it can end up with a monkey acting unpredictably, because remember, they are wild animals. So attacks are very rare, okay? I used to do these presentations every year at Zimbali, and I sat there and I said, monkeys will never attack people, until I had 3 residents attacked by a monkey, completely unprovoked, chased from behind, or actually run up from behind and bitten on the back of the leg, okay? Like I said, the school down the road, I know of at least 5 incidents quite recently where kids have also been bitten. So attacks are rare, okay? It doesn't happen often, and it's usually 1 or 2 problematic monkeys that are doing these, you know, that they are highly habituated, highly confident, and highly aggressive that will escalate to a bite. But it's extremely rare. I mean, if you think about how many humans we have along the KZN coastline, you think about how many monkeys we have along the KZN coastline, and you think about how many incidents there are, then they generally hit front page news because it's sensational. There was a bite in the Mshlonga Rocks, but that was purely a case of misplaced aggression. So yes, it does happen, but if you look at it from a statistical point of view, it's probably in the 0.something% of risk. And ultimately, like I touched on earlier, they're wild animals, so let's just treat them with respect, okay? We wouldn't go up to a lion or a leopard or a hyena and dangle some food in front of them and try and feed them. They're wild animals. They also have canines. Let's treat them with respect. Okay, next page, please. Next slide. So literally right after I sent the presentation through today, I came across an article on News 24. The headline was, KZN hospitals grapple with monkey invasions. Okay, and there you can see a campaign urging people to stop feeding in other parts of the world. So I think slowly but surely we're getting out of this mentality of, oh shame, let's feed them, to these are wild animals. They know how to look after themselves. We're causing the issue. Let's stop. Let's be part of the solution. At the end of the day, the environment must be managed. Every single environment is managed. The Kruger National Park, there's no such thing as a wild place where animals just roam freely, unfortunately. We've interfered to such an extent that everything is so fragmented and disturbed that we can't just let nature be, okay? Animals are relocated, animals are culled, animals are managed in every single protected area in South Africa, in Africa. It's just the reality of the situation. So it doesn't mean that we go out there guns blazing, but it doesn't mean that we just sit back and say, oh, nature will take care of itself. It can't. We've interfered so much that it actually can't. With that said, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. So I've emphasized that already, that there's no silver bullet solution. There's nothing that's going to fix it just once off and quickly. It's a whole bunch of different actions that need to cumulatively work towards mitigating it. You're never going to solve it. Okay, you're never going to reduce it. You're never going to completely solve it, all right? But you can reduce it. You can reduce the severity and the frequency of such incidences. And that's our objective at Zimbali Estate. We're not going to eliminate it. I can be very honest about that to all my residents, but we're going to reduce the severity of incidents and we're going to reduce the frequency of it. Okay. So just the general principles to sort of summarize what we've spoken about. Stop feeding, okay? That's actively feeding and passively feeding. We have that responsibility to secure our bins and secure our homes, because whether we're directly feeding or not, it's still an additional food resource, and it still changes, it alters the natural behavior of those monkeys. So like I've said, no access to anthropogenic food and waste. Extremely important. Stop close interaction, okay? By playing with the monkeys or going up to monkeys, you're teaching monkeys that we don't equal danger anymore, okay? You're habituating them, they're losing those fear of humans. The next step is they're going to take food from you. We need to rewild monkeys, okay? And by stopping feeding, by stopping close interaction, we can rewild them and push them back into the natural areas and natural behavior. Most importantly, we need to make an effort to coexist. So we can sit here and blame the monkeys as much as we want, but ultimately we are the ones that have caused the issue. Okay, like I said, I walk out 50 kilometers into the Drakensberg Mountains. There are no issues with habituated animals. Why? Because there's no people there. Where do we have issues with habituated people? Those of you that go to a game reserve, if you're driving 3 hours from rest camp and you come across a troop of monkeys, they don't run to your car for food. They generally check you out, a little bit skittish, one or two bark, and they sort of just carry on with their natural foraging. What happens the moment you park at a picnic site or a rest camp? Why? Concentration of people causing the problem. So we also have to make an effort to coexist, and ultimately we are the ones that cause the problem, but we can be part of the solution. Okay, but we can only do that by understanding the issue, understanding the solutions, and educating others as well. Next slide, please. So again, just really summarizing and driving home the same points. We need to agree and discipline ourselves to stop feeding. Do not encourage interaction. Don't have food visible. Don't have attractants visible, enticing monkeys to your property or into your house. Secure your bins. Safeguard our homes. Okay, it's our responsibility to adapt as well a little bit. We're living in their territory. As much as we bought our homes and we don't want to be prisoners in our homes, we don't have to be prisoners. But for that 1 hour a day where the monkeys come through, just close up. It's not that difficult. Educate others, okay? There's a lot of misconceptions about monkeys. There's a lot of misinformation out there. A lot of people with different agendas driving home different stories. Again, like I said, you can have your own opinions, you can't have your own facts. Admire, respect, and enjoy monkeys as wild animals. Don't interfere with them, and maintain those natural corridors. Okay, so we need natural space for monkeys to exist and coexist peacefully with us. So if we can do this, and it's not going to be overnight, and it's not going to be easy, but slowly but surely they'll learn that we aren't that source of food. Currently, they look at your house the same way they look at a big fruiting fig tree, okay? A source of food. They look at you the same way they look at a big fruiting fig tree, a source of food. Okay? Now, if we can do this, there will be a diminishing of human-monkey conflict. Like I said, we're not going to eliminate it. It's always going to exist. But we can reduce the severity and the frequency of these incidents. We can live in harmony, but it's going to take a concerted effort by everyone, and not just the people in the room, but it's going to be an estate-wide thing. It's going to be a residential area, a suburb effort. Like I said, we all breathe the same air. So the monkeys that visit you and visit me, if we aren't on the same page, we're not going to win. And ultimately, you can hate them, you can love them, they're here to stay, and we all need to do what's best for both of us. And ultimately, I hope this presentation has given some insight to that. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Yes?
I don't live in an estate, but in a freestanding house, and we've got a lot of people that put the black bags out on the pavements, and it's not in bins. How can that problem be solved? Because some people, will secure their rubbish, but others and just put it all, and it's a total chaos mess.
Mm.
Trust me.
Yeah, so unfortunately, we're also dealing with human apathy and people that don't care. So it's not easy, and it's a process of conversion as opposed to sort of disciplining them or coming down on them. So I think one of the biggest failures of the environmental movement as a whole is the sort of mightier than thou approach of many people in the environmental movement to say, well, you're not doing things properly, and look how I do things, I'm the example, you should be more like me. As opposed to approaching them and say, hi, you know, look, we've got these monkeys here, and educate and convert.
Go all over. Can they not implement a fine or something for those people that don't do it?
In an estate, yes. Outside of an estate, I mean,
What about, do you not have like a neighborhood watch that you're part of?
or a community WhatsApp group, you know. So, like I said, it's our responsibility to educate.
Like a little button with the
Yeah.
badge. They're really not very expensive.
Just the black bags go up and they rip them open
Mm.
and all this rubbish and get hurt. And
Yeah.
Anything. But so much, so if you can try and encourage people like our neighborhood watches, they encourage people rather to either buy those silver, I don't know if you've
Yeah.
seen those silver things.
yes.
It opens up, it's like a semi-round thing, and you put your bags in, you can close it, or you take your wheelie bin out, but
Yeah.
so long as your wheelie bin has got a little latch on it, then they won't be able to access your bags. So it's really just about encouraging people.
Changing mentalities.
How
So,
do you find people in your garden? You know people are feeding animals.
so
How do you catch them? You walk past a camera or something?
oh no, it's easy. The monkeys are sitting waiting there for food. They're not acting naturally. They're not foraging. They're not moving through an area. They're sitting in one space for 2 or 3 hours.
But do you take a photograph?
Oh, then I'll just approach the resident and say, look, I understand you might be feeding them out of the goodness of your heart, and I can empathize with that. But let me just try and educate you as to the damage that you are actually causing, not just for your surrounding neighbors, but also for that troop. So again, you know, it's the mentalities, it's people's mindset that we need to try and change through education. It's not easy, and you know, generally people just think they wheel their garbage, and that's the end of their responsibility, because now it's the garbage man's responsibility.
Is
But
there anything you can spray on there?
nah, I don't think so.
Glue or something?
Nah, I don't think so. So I think.
I don't know. Something recently.
So I think, you know, it's to try and link that to the impact on them, because people only care when it impacts them. Okay, so if you can educate people to say, look, you putting your bins out in that way is encouraging monkeys to be in the area and to raid from your home. Sorry, Sean had his hand up there.
Sorry, hold on. Sorry, what did you ask?
People have to use wheelie bins in this estate.
Yes, we do.
Some live in the seaward grass.
I'm buying a whole lot of latches on, and you guys are coming to buy them, aren't you?
Someone seaward grass is moving the garbage in the boat. Monkeys come and all the stuff is all on the ground.
Can dogs be friends with a monkey?
So I think they know that
Instinct's a powerful thing.
the monkeys are there every single day.
I don't spend on the monkeys are better than used to say, you know?
Okay. Again, it all depends on
But then
personalities.
Now, mother comes down, the dog's a bit bigger. She still plays.
Yeah,
I'm so scared of little bitches.
yeah. Play can often
Yeah.
escalate. Okay.
Just a quick thing, I know just for people in the room, that's all. Basically, rehabilitating monkeys for about 15 years. Vervet monkeys. I rescue them every day. I rescue probably about 10 a week. I work with the only registered organisation in KwaZulu-Natal to actually rehabilitate monkeys, monkey health club, not one of the major ones. There's just a few things. I mean, I really firstly want to appreciate you for coming out and doing this, because, like you say, I like you taking the balanced approach. I've got guys shooting, you can see the estate here that we're dealing with, which just to touch on that for everybody in the room, is currently a 20,000 rand reward standing for anyone who be wanting to report a monkey shooter. And that will be paid over 20,000 rand stands. And the same thing, which is quite interesting, we have a 10,000 rand reward for anybody who can prove you were actually attacked by a monkey. You know, all the CCTV footage and that. And just to touch on that side, right, I've got some notes. I've never been bitten by a monkey. 15 years of picking them up, handling them, like you say, picking up the babies. There's been glued, shot, beaten,
Okay.
It's actually called Chlorocebus. And I don't know if we have the Aethiopus species here. I think we've got Chlorocebus.
Okay.
The wording is Chlorocebus Ethereus. But we must just double check, that doesn't matter. Just one thing, you heard, like, I know you said, if we get the monkeys out of their area, we bring them, they come into a troop, if we have food in an area, they'll come to, a specific area. One thing with female monkeys is they will never ever leave their territory. Never leave their territory. The moms, the females, the grands, every one of them will live in one place to one place. All you guys will know, you have the same monkeys coming through your area.
Yeah.
You've got half-tail, you've got scar, you've got ears. They do not move. If two troops walk into each other's area, it's death. I've only ever seen it once in my life. Steve from Monkey Help One has only seen it twice in his life. Two female troops veer onto each other, they will kill each other. The only thing is the males that get rooted out, obviously like you say, they disperse, which is what we do. So they'll get cuts down the sides, they'll get cuts across their things, ears missing, tails. We never rescue them. It's males, it's nature. It's unlucky. If somebody shot them, then yes, we'll save them. I understand.
It's a natural,
So it's one thing that people say, like, if you're feeding them, or you've got food, they're going to come to your area. They're going to come to your area in any case.
Yeah, it's not that they come to you, they're going to stay there for much longer.
Well, as well as saying, because our neighbours had a feeding station involved. So they didn't feed them by hand. They had a couple of stations. And we actually have many examples over all these years of successful feeding stations. You can actually speak to Steve. I'm actually in talks with Ashton School at this moment to install a responsive feeding station to stop the monkeys interacting with them. The major thing about that aggression is you can see, I know for a fact, those guys at Ashton are running with tasers, banging their sticks and chasing you. You're creating that same anger. You said to yourself, the monkeys learn. Monkeys are learning that behavior, but they're getting aggressive towards the kids. But yet you come to our place and we live right where the monkeys live. I know where they live in the tree. They will leave in the morning and they'll come back in the afternoon. They were very vicious when we arrived there. And now being here a year later, they come through the house. They'll sit with us. They'll interact, but off they'll go. They're not tame per se, but they're not petrified. They're not running for their lives. They're not aggressive anymore. They're not actually like showing that fear. When I noticed when I got there, the kids were running and throwing sticks at them, and they were going at them, and this was go. It's the same as the dogs. I will tell you now, if your dog attacks monkeys or attacks animals, it's because of you as the owner, and I'll prove that. You're the bad person. Your dogs and animals are taught like that. It's an ingrained thing. So I just wanted to mention about them moving out the territories. The one thing you guys must understand, it is true, 70 to 80 trees for free. Okay, I have been in the park already. We've been planting left, right, and centre. One thing you guys must know is the houses are removed all the food sources. So I understand they don't feed them, but where are they getting their food? That's the main thing that my problem is. It's like there are no more green corridors. Even in front of it, they're knacking the bushes down. I'm trying to plant as fast as I can, man. It's going to take me 15 years to get those trees to even grow. The babies that are in that tree are being lost. I know the babies don't carry over, and I've been rescuing them for 15 years. Again, not opinion, just straightforward. And the saddest thing is both our sanctuaries have just had land claims and being removed by Zimbali. And Zimbali shot our monkeys. So it's a problem even with, who do you phone? If you guys run today and something's injured a monkey, who do you phone?
I'll take this dog home.
No one's going to phone. No one's going to come pick up the monkey. If you give it to SPCA, they can't. So it's another thing.
So
Yeah.
just to clarify on the territory thing, obviously each environment is different, but what we've picked up in Zimbali is those territories are dynamic as well. Not in that there's massive changes, but it's constantly shifting. We've seen in the last 3 or 4 years probably 3 or 4 of those troop clashes at territorial markers, because we follow the troops, we follow the dynamics, we basically have all their home ranges mapped, and that it does change. We'll see certain monkey troops in areas that we didn't expect them, and they almost share certain areas as part of a day. So one of our facilities had 4 different troops visiting that same spot. So they do overlap, and they do almost share territory at times, and those territories are also dynamic. But what happens when you're feeding is that you're ultimately causing them to spend a lot more time in that area, and whilst it might not be problematic for you, it could be problematic for other people that are in that area. Okay. And then on the feeding stations thing,
I understand, but just one thing, I understand you're talking about Zimbali and Seaward and his estates. They've got these
Yeah.
we're trying to habituate a troop into an area. Do you know how long it takes to habituate a troop into an area?
Well, we've had pretty good success with moving them into certain wilder areas.
Do you know how long it takes? It's 2 to 3 years.
We had it in
3
months.
years to habituate a troop into a territory.
Okay.
Because if they wander, they get killed by the monkeys. So I mean, I understand, I'm firmly in the camp of the birds, but I mean, we help the birds out, it's the balance of nature. That as we build houses, I agree the monkeys are coming into your house, they can get the food. At the same time, in our little quadrant there, where we've got things growing and people that put food, they're not raiding our house anymore. They conflict.
If I can, and I agree with you completely. The one thing I probably disagree with, the only point that I think I disagree with you that came up is that there's a, and you're probably right to a large extent, there's the haters and the lovers. And I think there's a lot of us that have a real respect for nature. And, you know, I absolutely adore the monkeys. I think they're great.
Mm.
Put water out for them on hot days. They come and we see them, we look at them. I don't like what they're doing on the estate. I mean, they are certainly in our areas, they destroy the bird life. I mean, we've had so many birds nesting in our properties. They come and they rip the nest apart, eat the babies, kill the
Yeah.
mothers. But despite that, and I know that's just nature, because it's cruel. But the biggest problem I think that we have on this estate, and in the same way, I think somebody who shoots a monkey should be treated far worse than get a 20,000 fine. No, it should be worse than that. But the same thing should be for someone who feeds the monkeys.
Yeah.
Somebody that's, what I mean is somebody that's throwing out bread and things like that and encouraging them, you're taking away their fear. I'm seeing it with my wife, who's a tiny little monkey. She is petrified of looking downstairs because if there's monkeys there, they go into it. And she is afraid of them. She's afraid of them, that's factual. But we literally cannot walk from our main door down to our little place with anything in our hands because they try and get it. And I get it, but I think we've created that in them by taking away
Free me. Free me. Monkey helpline.
We supported it at
It is Free Me Wildlife.
and they almost have gone bankrupt. They've been on quite a big campaign to
Crow?
worry
Is it not crow? I'm not sure.
That's why I say
So he's saying that the Zimbali with a child, stopping feeding has made a difference. You're saying like that.
yeah, what I was talking about, this is from Zimbali where it's Estate Estates. It's beautiful big trees.
But we're talking about here as well.
I agree that as well. What I was saying is I'm talking as a general consensus throughout monkeys in general.
Yeah, but yeah, we're really worried about in Seaward.
I understand. The guys, these guys that have been doing this for 30 years are doing feeding stations in gated estates with success. And this is why I say that somebody needs to approach and speak actually go to national school to speak to them about a feeding station. If there's an actual option, these are guys that are doing it for 30 years. That's what I'm saying, is that it has been a proven.
So on the feeding station, if you remember, my comment was it can work under very controlled circumstances and by someone who knows what they're doing. And I don't advocate. Yeah.
people. And the point
So,
I think that's what
Just to your point,
encourage.
we do have a fine, 10,000 Rand. And it's the same thing, you go to Kruger National Park, you go to Shishlui and Falozi. There's a 500 Rand, 1,000 Rand, 2,000 Rand fine if you are caught feeding any animal in those reserves. Why? Because it alters the natural ecology. When I used to go to the game reserves when I was this big, there was signs there that said, you feed them, we shoot them. Okay? And obviously that's too much for today's sort of day and age. But that is the harsh reality, and it's happened. I mean, there's hyenas that are habituated in reserves. They get shot. Because why? A German tourist thinks it's funny to throw a thing of Boerewors here. What happens? The hyena comes back. So it's not just monkeys, it's in any species. You're altering the natural ecology of that animal.
Just to stand on that, there's a very big fine difference between hand feeding and feeding stations.
If done under controlled.
Hand feeding is where they lose the field there. Feeding stations, not so.
But there's a lot of people on this estate that are hand feeding.
Yeah.
And some of them are feeding, some of them in fairness are feeding the birds and they're throwing out food for the monkeys are getting for the birds too. And I think if we stop that, I mean I've lived in a number of estates across Africa with my work that I do, and every one of them got monkeys. no state have I ever been on that the monkeys are as aggressive as they are here, and they've lost their fear. They've lost their fear completely.
I think that's what
Until we do
brings
something and we start finding the buggers, let's stop them.
So there was a question. Yeah, she's had her hand up for quite some time. You must have a cramp there by now.
Is it okay to plant, say, non-indigenous things like strawberries and stuff for them to forage, eat in your garden?
They can, but strawberries are only going to really benefit you and the monkey. Whereas if you plant something indigenous, it can benefit all the local wildlife. So your fruit-eating birds, for example, if you plant a nice mahogany tree, it'll attract them, it'll attract the monkeys. So it's more beneficial from an environmental, general ecosystem perspective to plant indigenous. But if you want to plant sacrificial things for monkeys, you're more than welcome to, yeah. Did you say there was a 10,000 Rand reward for anyone that has video footage of an attack? Okay, well, I'll claim that tomorrow. I have CCTV footage of one of my shuttle drivers parked. He had his arm on the side of the window. The monkey jumped up, bit him on the arm, and ran off. And that's not to create any fear or whatever, but I'm going to be 10,000 Rand richer. Unfortunately, like I say, the environment's dynamic, so there's always that outlier, there's always that exception. It's extremely rare, and like I said, the risk is at 0.0 something %. But we have had cases of it, and I suspect it was one monkey that was responsible for all of the attacks.
We have had one attack, and it was only because those monkeys have actually been taken as pets.
So that monkey with the shotgun pellets was the one responsible for the bites. So there you can see why.
Our record for the monkey with the most pellets the other day was beaten. It was 21 pellets in a monkey. It was just beaten. 25 pellets, no eye, tail cut off, skinned, more, and the same guy went over it. You can sit with impunity. So.
Any other questions? Yes.
I have an animal like, but if the monkeys get too much, the crazy store sells a long cylinder and it's got a lever. You fill it with water and you can shoot it at the monkey if it really is getting on your nerves and it's a very long shot. I do that sometimes and I've just got to pick it up now and the monkey's gone. You don't hurt them.
Because they've learned there's a consequence to that. Yeah. So it's non-lethal, it's non-harmful, but there is a consequence to your action. So they know that they can't call your bluff because they're going to get wet, and they don't like that, and they'll move off. Sorry?
We're going to issue one of those. So we're issuing one of those and a dustbin with a latch. Okay. But I mean, for monkeys, if we do find them injured, the best thing is to contact the office. And there is crow. We use them a lot.